Mann, the editor-in-chief at the Babylon Bee, and thank you guys so much for having me out here. I forgot my football highlight reel and left my championship rings at home, but hopefully I can still bring something interesting for you guys today. So the Babylon Bee is a Christian news satire site, which is an interesting string of words that usually aren't put together in the English language. But we write fake news stories that are intended to communicate a point. They're intended to communicate truth. They're intended to make you laugh. They're intended to bring some humor in the middle of some darkness. And humor does all sorts of things for us in our Christian walk. Humor is very important. I think it's something that we at the church need to work on. It's something that, and I'm not just talking about, pastors who tell lame jokes. I think, I'm not talking about anybody in here. I think for a long time, Christians have been seen kind of as the fuddy-duddies at the party, the guys who have a long face and are very self-serious and very self-righteous. And that's not a great perception. And I think it's something that we can fix, and it's something that we can work on. But first, I want to back up a little bit and talk about the kind of culture that we are writing satire in, the kind of culture that we find ourselves in today. It is a crazy world out there, and it is a dark world out there, and it's one that needs light, and it's one that needs laughter and humor. And those are God's gift to us to help reach this culture. If you're familiar with the phrase, the terms modernism and postmodernism and pre-modernism, we currently find ourselves in this postmodern culture. And what postmodernism means is that truth is relative. And in fact, we're almost in a postmodern culture now, where 20 years ago you would argue with people and they would say, oh, that's all right, that's your truth and I have my truth. Well, now we're in this kind of strange place where truth doesn't matter at all anymore. People don't even think that there is such a thing as truth. They don't care about your truth and my truth. They say that there's no truth. We wrote a Babylon Bee article back in 2017. I think I have it up on the slide. 2 + 2 = 4, insists closed-minded bigot. And believe it or not, we wrote this in 2017, and a few years later, I think I have another slide, a math professor claimed that the equation 2 + 2 = 4 reeked of white supremacist patriarchy. And this lady was going back and forth with people on Twitter about how you can't claim that 2 + 2 = 4 because it's, I don't know, exclusionary, or it relies on Western modes of thinking or something like that. This is the kind of culture that we are writing satire, and this is the kind of culture that our church is in. G.K. Chesterton wrote 100 years ago, "We shall soon be in a world in which a man may be howled down for saying that 2 and 2 make 4, in which furious party cries will be raised against anybody who says that cows have horns, in which people will persecute the heresy of calling a triangle a 3-sided figure. And they will hang a man for maddening the mob with the news that grass is green." He also was a prophet. Chesterton was a guy that was a pre-modern. He believed in the value of truth and beauty and tradition, and he believed in the power of those things to change the culture. And he saw coming into his age, the age of modernism, when it was reason, and reason was going to bring us to truth. And when that failed, we fell into our current phase of postmodernism. We're writing satire in an age when you have to be a biologist to know what a woman is. I don't know if any of you guys saw that story. One of the Supreme Court justices that was recently nominated and confirmed was asked if she could define what a woman is, and she said no, because she is not a biologist. Now, this is a men's conference. I'm not a biologist, but I think it's all men out there. Well, I want to make sure, though. So we wrote an article at the Babylon Bee that was called "Signs You Might Be a Man," and I wanted to go through a few of the signs and Just make sure, we don't have any women out there. So signs you might be a man from the Babylon Bee. Number one, is it uncomfortable when you cross your legs for some reason? Might be a man. Um, do you stand by open car hoods, pointing and gesturing? Might be a man. Can you effortlessly win at any women's sports league? Be a man. Do you often think about nothing for long periods of time? Are you incapable of finding the milk in the refrigerator even while you're staring directly at the milk? Do you refer to your favorite team of professional athletes who have no idea who you are as we? Can you navigate unfamiliar roads but are hopelessly lost in a shopping mall? And do you pause Lord of the Rings 800 times to provide helpful commentary? Would you be completely and utterly helpless without your spouse? And finally, do you have XY chromosomes? So if you answered yes to all of those, you might be a man, and you're in the right place here. This is kind of an exercise that shows us that humor is something that communicates truth. Humor is something that brings light. Humor is something that helps us to laugh at ourselves and helps us to see what's truly important. Humor is something that takes the stress out of our lives. I talk to people who say that they get their news from the Babylon Bee. Now, I don't exactly recommend that, but but I know people who are too stressed out when they're doom scrolling on Twitter and Facebook, and there's all these headlines proclaiming the end of the world or world wars or bank collapses or whatever's going on. And when they can read a Babylon Bee headline and absorb the news through a joke, it kind of already sets them at ease. They don't have to worry that this is the end of the world. It shows them the true place of the news in our crazy 24/7 news cycle. So the Babylon Bee, the reason that we founded it 7 years ago, we were in the middle of the 2016 election, and we wanted this powerful tool that could communicate truth to a culture that no longer believes in truth. Believe it or not, jokes communicate truth, and sometimes they communicate truth much more powerfully than straight speech can. Here's a few Babylon Bee articles, give you a flavor for what we do on the site. Oh, I think go back a few. Study: average father spends 97% of time running around house turning lights off. Husband daycare now available at all Hobby Lobby locations. First female referee throws flag on the play but won't say what's wrong. Man sitting literally 3 feet away from Bible asks God to speak to him. And man brilliantly diffuses argument by telling wife to calm down. So that's the kind of thing that we do day in and day out at the Babylon Bee. It's always been hard to write comedy. You talk to people in Hollywood who write drama or direct drama, documentaries, and all other kinds of genres, action films and whatnot. And they always say, "I can write this. I can make these kind of movies, but writing comedy eludes me." Writing comedy is very tough to do. There's something intangible about it. There's something about timing and tone. There's something subtle about it. There's a phrase that you can't dissect a joke because it's like dissecting a frog. You learn something about the frog, but it dies in the process. G.K. Chesterton wrote 100 years ago that satire has weakened in our era for several reasons, but chiefly, I think, because the world has become too absurd to be satirized. 100 years ago, the world was too absurd to be satirized. Now we're in an age when Babylon Bee jokes are coming true, and The Simpsons is predicting the future, and South Park is predicting the future. Not that I watch those; I'm a Christian, but um, I've heard from my non-Christian friends things about those. Uh, it's tough. It is tough to write comedy, but I think it's worth it. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to call you guys today in the few minutes that we have together, is to understand the gift of humor that God has given us. And maybe we can just come away with a little bit more of an appreciation for the power of humor and what that can do for our Christian walks. What it can do for our ministries, what it can do for our relationships. It's a dark world out there, and God has given us this great gift of humor to help us to laugh at the darkness. We'll look at some examples from the Babylon Bee. We'll look at some examples from Scripture of times when the prophets used satire, and I just want to call on you men to be joyful warriors. That's really attractive, to the world. We need to stand up. We need to fight for our families. We need to fight for truth. But I think we need to do it with a joy that the rest of the world does not have. And that's something that I think contributed to the success of the Babylon Bee. We weren't trying to launch this crazy viral satire site. We were just writing jokes about worship leaders. But we had this self-deprecating tone, and we were willing to laugh at ourselves, and we realized we're a bunch of introverted, dorky guys in our garages writing jokes for the internet. And I think that kind of tone was really attractive to people, and the scope and the appeal of what the Babylon Bee does started to expand beyond the church, and it started to reach people well beyond our Christian audience. To kind of build on this a little bit, to explain how the world, the current state of the world that we're writing these jokes in, and what the response is to humor. I wanted to look at a few times that there has been some pushback to Babylon Bee articles out in the world. It's really strange, because like I said, the Babylon Bee is just guys that want to make people laugh. That's all that we really care about. When we first started doing the site, we weren't trying to change the world. We were trying to tell jokes, and we suddenly found this like extreme anger against us from different sects of people throughout the world. I think you got a slide there. This is Brian Stelter from CNN. He called us a fake news site, and he accused us of using the satire label to just kind of disguise the fact that we were trying to mislead people. I don't know, they thought we were Russian bots or something sharing misinformation. Donnie O'Sullivan of CNN attacked us for getting shared. Well, we wrote an article on a news story that happened, and the Babylon Bee article got shared more times than the CNN article on the same news story. So Donnie O'Sullivan of CNN was not happy with that, and then the guy that he's quote tweeting up there, or the lady that he's quote tweeting, is a CIA agent that was also concerned about the spread of Babylon Bee articles. The New York Times accused us of being a far-right misinformation site. They painted this picture that we were these guys in this dark lair smoking cigars, like cackling. How can we fool grandmas on Facebook? USA Today slams us with relentless fact checks all the time. We wrote a joke saying that Trump had proposed a space navy uh, after water was discovered on the moon, and we had a Photoshop of an aircraft carrier on the moon, and USA Today decided it was worth a fact check to make sure that it wasn't true. We also reported that the Ninth Circuit Court overturned Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, and USA Today also fact checked that one. Facebook removed a post of ours where we said that Senator Hirono demanded that Amy Coney Barrett be weighed against a duck to see if she's a witch, and they said that we were inciting violence with that joke. These fact checks are one of the things that keep coming back, and that's part of this whole discussion of a post-truth culture. People can't tell jokes from reality. And any of you guys ever been fooled by a Babylon Bee article? Thought it was real on the you guys come up on stage? No, I'm just kidding. Um, but but it's hard to tell truth from reality a lot of times, and yet we got some of the most ridiculous fact checks from these big tech sites that were trying to accuse us of spreading misinformation. Here's a couple that got fact checked. CNN purchases industrial sized washing machine to spin the news. It's fact checked by Snopes. So here's a couple others. Trump, I have done more for Christianity than Jesus. He might have said something close to that. I don't. Uh, California Christians must now register Bibles as assault weapons. Thanks to new laws, VeggieTales finally introduces new cannabis character. Ocasio-Cortez appears on The Price is Right, guesses everything is free. And finally, Pope Francis says the COVID vaccine will now be required to enter heaven. Fact checked. Most concerningly, most recently, we are actually about a year ago, last week, we had our Twitter account uh, locked out. We got banned from Twitter. We got locked out from reaching our 1.5 million followers. We did a joke where we called a transgender public official a man who is a biological male, and we were banned from Twitter. And it is a strange world to us where we could kind of satirically and wryly point out a truth that a man is a man, a true statement, not in any serious dispute, also being done as a joke, and get removed from the public square. Our account was locked out until we agreed to delete the tweet, but we took a stand and decided that we wouldn't, no matter what the cost was, no matter if it meant we would no longer ever have a Twitter account again. And that's one thing I want to talk about. That whole controversy is we weren't trying to change the world. We were not thinking we were making this massive moral stand. We just said we're not going to delete a tweet that says a man is a man. We're not going to do that. It was, to us, it was just crazy and insane, and to us it was a small step of ordinary faithfulness. But as we did that, we saw dozens more people stand up. Eventually, Elon Musk called us and started asking us what was happening with that whole thing. Elon Musk ended up buying Twitter and unlocking our Twitter account. Um, and I'm not saying that we were the sole cause of that, but the Washington Post reported that when Elon Musk walked into the Twitter building, his first order of business was the first order that he gave them was unlock the Babylon Beast account. This just small little step of faithfulness, of staying true to our beliefs, of staying true to what we believed, ended up changing the world. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the author of the Gulag Archipelago, said, "The simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world." I believe it is time for us as Christians to take a stand. I believe it's time for us to fight back. I believe it's time for us to be bold in the public square. You know, people talk about cancel culture. There's a lot of there's a lot of news stories going around about cancel culture. What exactly that is? There's a lot of discussion. But cancel culture would have no power if we wouldn't censor ourselves, if we would agree to just stand up and be who we are. Because honestly, a lot of times when you stand up and you say, "Yeah, I believe that," you'll find that half the people in the room stand up with you. And I know a lot of us are at sensitive workplaces and it's a little bit harder to do that. But I want to spend a little bit of time now talking about the free speech, the importance of free speech, and what that means for us, and why we need to defend that, and specifically why we need to defend comedy, and the importance of defending comedians and comics' right to free speech. What role does that play in a free society? So I want to spend a little bit of time looking at comedy and satire. and what that can do for us and how important that is as a tool of communication. First, satire has a prophetic role to play. And we talked about Babylon be predicting the future as prophets. I'm not a modern day prophet, so don't stone me if a Babylon Bee article doesn't come true. But I mean prophetic in the sense of proclaiming truth. That's what satire can do. Throughout the Bible and church history, God used humor to mock the foolish and call people to see through the fleetingness of current events to behold something greater than themselves. You guys know the story, of course, of Elijah challenging the prophets of Baal. He didn't attempt to reason with them, right? When the prophets of Baal were saying, our God is the true God, and the Israelites were saying, Yahweh is the true God. And Elijah didn't write a 3,000 word blog post on why Baal is not a true God, right? He didn't write a long Facebook post about it. He instead simply mocked their God. All he did was just ruthlessly ridicule their God. 1 Kings 18, 26 and 27. And they took the bowl that was given them, and they prepared it and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. So you look at the power of mockery in that simple moment for Elijah to just use this brutal, harsh language. And I know there's a discussion about like how harsh should Christians be in their humor and how sarcastic should you be, and can satire be too mean? And I think there's an important conversation around that. But I think when you're mocking this idea like this false god or this false cultural idol, that is like a no holds barred moment for the prophet Elijah. He is extremely bold in going up to this God that they worship. That's their entire life, this culture of religion of worshiping this false God. And he says, maybe your God is, on the toilet. Maybe he's asleep. Maybe he went on a walk and he's not around for you guys right now. Even God himself mocked idol worship. In Isaiah 44, we read this. The wood carver uses part of the wood to make a fire. With it, he warms himself and bakes his bread. And then he takes the rest of this wood and he makes himself a god to worship. He makes an idol and bows down in front of it. He burns part of the tree to roast his meat and to keep himself warm. And he says, that fire feels good. And then he takes what's left and he makes his god, a carved idol. He falls down in front of it, worshiping and praying to it. Rescue me, he says, you are my God. This is actually a really funny picture where the prophet Isaiah, speaking the word of the Lord, is kind of asking, like, when you go out and you cut down a tree and you use part of it to make a fire and part of it as your God, how do you know you didn't get it backwards? And that you're burning your God and you're worshiping firewood. Of course, if you go through the Gospels, you know that Jesus was absolutely ruthless with the Pharisees, calling them a brood of vipers. And he's talking to the Pharisees, and they're so proud of their heritage, and they say, Abraham's our father. And he goes, actually, you know what? Your father is the devil. Like that, that is the most brutal mockery that you can imagine. And he got crucified. So, that's how brutal it was for them. They knew what he was trying to say there. When Jesus is given the coin and it says Caesar is the son of God on it, Jesus responds in kind of, this is a paraphrase, but he basically responds, oh, if Caesar's the son of God, then give Caesar back his blasphemous coins. Let him be the son of God. Let him have this coin, proclaiming that the allegiance of the Christian is not to kingdoms of this world. We don't have a ton of time left, but we can go through church history and just look at all the great Christian writers who used satire and exaggeration and mockery and ridicule. Martin Luther and his Catholic opponents traded sarcastic barbs. And if you read some of Martin Luther's insults, you would you wince a little bit. You're like, that's not very nice. That's not very sensitive. C.S. Lewis shone a light on Christian living in the Screwtape Letters, and if you read the works of G.K. Chesterton, he absolutely had wit and satire aplenty. So we see that Christians are part of this storied tradition of skewing the powerful through humor. This is not ground that we should cede to simply people on the outside of the church. This is kind of what I've seen, is that we kind of backed away. Christianity kind of backed away in a lot of ways from the arts, from making movies, from writing great novels. I mean, you look at Christians 100 years ago wrote Lord of the Rings, and nowadays you go to the Christian bookstore and it's Amish romance novels. Why did we why did we retreat? Why did we retreat from that space? Why did we give up the arts, and why did we give up humor and comedy? You turn on the TV and all the comedians are, secular leftists that hate you and just tell jokes about how dumb Christians are. Why did we give that up? Why can't we fight back for that? Here's some here's a few Babylon Bee headlines that kind of have that prophetic bent to them. Liberty University criticized after unveiling stained glass window depicting Donald Trump. That was also fact-checked, if I remember right. So this was during the pandemic. Inspiring celebrities spell out, "We're all in this together," with their yachts. NBA players wear special lace collars to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That was also fact-checked by Snopes. And Cracker Jack changed his name to more politically correct Caucasian Jack. I'll clip right along here. And another role of satire is encouragement. Satire and humor have a way of lightening the burden of people living in a chaotic world. Sometimes we laugh so that we don't cry. We got an email from a fan of our site and podcast who said, "This past year I've been going through a crisis. There are a lot of things that I can't control, but every day I take my border collie for a walk and I listen to the Babylon Bee podcast. It gives me a lot of peace, and I love knowing that I'm not alone in Christian culture. You guys get me to lighten up and laugh at myself while taking more important things more seriously. I know God's mercies are new daily, and He will supply what I need for the future. But I want you guys to know that you've been one of God's methods of providing peace in my life lately." Here's another email from a fan that we got. "My husband of 17 years passed away unexpectedly at the age of 41 just over a year ago. You guys were a lifeline. Now I can still keep up with what's going on, but through the lens of humor. I can't tell you how hard my 14-year-old son and I laugh at your headlines, and you have no idea how much we need something to laugh at. I know you're probably tempted sometimes to wonder if running a satire website really matters, but I can tell you firsthand that you're doing God's work. The world needs someone to make them laugh and show them how stupid and silly the people who desire to rule them really are." Satire has this power to deflate the anxiety that we feel when we look at the darkness of the world around us. You look at some of the cultures and communities that have faced the most persecution have the most laughter and the best jokes, because they're able to kind of wryly and dryly look at the world and remind themselves that in the end God wins. That's what's so important about humor for us. It's okay for us to take a deep breath and chill out. Every time you read a headline and it says, World War III is coming tomorrow, or whatever the big the big thing of the day is, we love writing jokes about that stuff, not because it's not a serious topic, but because it reminds us we're a very small part of a very large history of humanity. And if you look at eternity and you look at the bent of eternity and you look at what God is doing through the church and what His sovereign purposes are in life, we don't have to be anxious. We know that we're just this little small part of the story, and that the things we're freaking out about today, we probably aren't going to remember next week for most of them. Here's a few headlines that do that for us at the Babylon Bee. We wrote this during the 2016 election. We published this article on the night of the election. Election results are in. Christ is still on His throne. A motorcyclist who identifies as a bicyclist sets cycling world record. Okay, take us to a different leader, say exasperated aliens after trying to communicate with Joe Biden. And then politics now, nation's fastest growing religion. Sometimes we just have to dryly state the truth. Humor helps remind us of our true place in the world, of our level of importance, of what God is doing. And what that lady said in that email was that the Babylon Bee helps her to laugh while taking more important things more seriously. And I think that's one of the important things about satire. If we write an article that's making fun of worship leaders or fog machines or laser light shows in the church or whatever these wooden things are, on the stage, uh, it's not because we're saying like, oh, that's a sin or something, right? It's because we're trying to point people and say, hey, that stuff, whatever, some churches do this, some churches do that, but there's something more important. And it's that we're worshiping the true and living God together. I think that is something that is really important for us. Let's just conclude with a few more headlines so we can get on with the conference here. State with no electricity orders everyone to drive cars that run on electricity. I don't even think that's satire. That's just true. Bible experts determine Goliath died of COVID-19. It's Chick-fil-A installs confessionals so you can repent from eating at Popeyes. Congress members to wear barcodes so lobbyists can scan prices and self-checkout. I think I got one more for you men here. Study finds 100% of men would eat any fruit given to them by a naked woman. Let me close with a Mark Twain quote. Power, money, persuasion, supplication, persecution, these can lift at a colossal lie, push it a little, crowd it a little, weaken it a little, century by century. But only laughter can blow a lie to rags and atoms at a blast. Against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. Thank you guys so much.